Thanks for joining us for the Member Excite presentation. The Member Excite presentation is informative, interesting to the audience, and showcases the strengths of the presenter as an entrepreneur and their area of expertise. It's not a sales pitch, it's a 10-minute educational and insightful exploration into what they do. And of course, it's exciting.
So today we're going to be hearing from the fantastic Rachel Bojnak from Passage Migration Consulting, How to Design Thinking. Rachel is the director and founder of her own law firm, Passage Migration Consulting. She created this law firm to provide an opportunity for individuals and companies to be part of a strategy creation to reach their migration outcomes. Oftentimes in the legal industry, only one part of the puzzle is provided. At Rachel's firm, she likes to deliver the whole map and recommend the best journey. Rachel has been practicing in law for over 10 years and has completed a life-changing MBA at Griffith University, which included a jaunt to Glasgow University for an amazing experience. The application of design thinking can be applied in any business that has a product or service, or it can be simply applied to everyday life. So in this presentation, Rachel will provide you with the basics of design thinking and how it can be used to improve the way you do business or life.
So design thinking. So everyone's sort of sitting there going, but you're a lawyer. What are you talking about? This has got nothing to do with immigration. My view is that design thinking has everything to do with everything, and you can probably use it to improve your business in some way or improve your life. You will have to come to one of my future Excite presentations to talk about how it can improve your life. But today we're going to talk about just the general application of design thinking, because this kind of blew my mind when I did my MBA. So I had only ever known law land. I had only ever known the way that law firms operate. And I hadn't really, jumped into the world of business prior to having done my MBA. So learning about design thinking was a mind-blowing experience for me. Hopefully I have some of even a small effect of that on you today. So who am I? So who am I to even tell you about this? So as I mentioned, or as the intro mentioned, I did my MBA at Griffith, and I learned about design thinking in an elective that I did over a summer semester by an excellent professor who essentially, as a MBA student, I was able to sit there and draw on giant pieces of butcher's paper with many markers that look something like this, because this is what my whole desk and office is made up of. And we were able to actually start to create solutions based on the customer. An interesting thought. Obviously, you're always trying to create solutions based on your customer, but this is the strategy in order to be able to do it. So what is design thinking? The purpose or the idea behind design thinking is that you're actually looking at who your customer is before you jump to a solution. So easier said than done, because as a lawyer, my job is to solve problems. My job is to answer questions. My job is to tell you how to do what you want me to tell you, what you think you need to do. So I just act on instructions. That's what I'm supposed to do. And I'm supposed to just give you the best advice to move ahead. But with design thinking, what I would do is actually talk to you, get to know you, and understand you a little bit better, so that my advice or my solution or the way in which I answer your question is specific to you, to your circumstance, and what you actually want to achieve. So design thinking is looking at the actual individual that you are trying to solve a problem for or trying to answer a question about, and with them in mind, then going through this process and coming up with the best way forward at the very end. So what is it used for? As again in the intro says, it can be used for everything from launching a new service, or considering whether to launch a new service, creating a new product, or trying to create a life journey map. That is actually what I ended up doing in my, because I was feeling rather disenfranchised with law at the time. And I didn't think that I should be spending time on an assignment, creating a solution for a law firm, that I didn't necessarily want to work for anymore. So what I did was I created a design thinking for life assignment on how I could apply this to even a personal journey. But today we're just going to get the basics down because I only have 10 minutes. And for anyone that knows design thinking, there is no way in hell I can get the full process of design thinking out in 10 minutes. So we are just going to go through the 5 steps, and depending on how much time I have, we'll get a little bit deeper into the first 2 steps because really they are the most important. Okay, so the first thing that we're going to do is we come up with a starting point. So our starting point is what you think you are trying to answer or what you think the problem is. So if you start to think about, okay, I want to launch a new product, that's your starting point. My website's not getting enough hits, that's your starting point. For a personal journey, my personal journey was, what do I want to do with my life? What do I want to be when I grow up? That is your starting point. So you kind of have to have some idea in mind as to what you're trying to solve by using this process. But we kind of start with something in mind. So I'm not getting enough hits or on my website, on my social media, my product, is this product going to work? Is it the right one for the market? All of these things. So that's where we start. We have a starting point in mind. And then we go through the process. So with our starting point in mind, the first stage of the process is to empathize. So empathy is obviously, sometimes not the biggest trait of a lawyer. So this was one that I kind of had to learn as well. Empathy is trying to understand your end user. So, or the customer that you are trying to solve the problem for. So what does that even mean? So if I think I know the solution to your problem, I am just assuming a whole bunch of things about you. But if I sit down and actually ask you some questions about your experience, about your circumstances, about your personal life, about the way in which you're trying to move forward, I will actually then be able to create a better solution to the problem that we're trying to solve. So if we look at empathy, so I'm not getting enough hits on my website. So let's sit down and talk to someone that's actually going onto your website. Who's going onto your website? Who do you want to be going onto your website? Talk to those people. What does the experience look like when they're clicking through your website? So it might be difficult to find the next button. It might be that you've got too much content. It might be that your pictures aren't pretty. It might be the branding not necessarily isn't aligned. So what you want to do is try and talk to people and understand what they're actually experiencing before you start to define the problem that you're trying to solve for that person. Then the next stage, after you've talked to people and you haven't assumed everything about everything, you're then defining your starting point. So you've actually talked to the person that you're trying to solve a problem for or answer a question for, and then you're defining what your starting point is. So at this point, it might be, your original starting point might have been, my website isn't getting enough hits. I'm going to build a new website. Then you actually talk to people and people say, no, I love your website. I love this page. I love that this does this. I love how this works, but I don't like this. I don't really understand why you would have that here. This branding doesn't talk to me. These pictures don't really align with your brand. So your defined position might then be, what can I do to improve the website to create a better customer experience? So that could be something as easy as moving a submit or a hello button to a different part of the screen. It might be that you create your the About Us page, for example, in a video. You might create a video that says, hey, this is a little bit about us. People speak to videos, or people learn from videos and understand videos a hell of a lot more than reading a whole bunch of words on a piece of paper. So then you start to define exactly what your position is, rather than, again, assuming what the position is based on what your knowledge is. The next part is to ideate. So ideate is unfiltered brainstorming. Ideation is creating a space for people to be creatively confident. So I totally stole that from the book, the Creative Confidence book. But essentially what you're doing is trying to create a space where people can think and express ideas in a way without restriction. And what does that mean? So that means that, Karen in accounting and Bob in the CEO and John in risk management are not stopping you from creating solutions to a problem. So it doesn't matter at this point in ideation how much it costs, what it looked like, whether it's something that is a complete pie in the sky idea or whether it's something that could be implemented tomorrow. The idea is that you are just coming up with any possible way of fixing the problem for the client that you now know to answer a defined problem that you've now created. The point is to not be filtered. You don't want to go in with the same mindset that you've always gone into with your business and sit there trying to figure out, oh, but I know that I've only got this much money coming in, or I know that John in risk is going to tell me this is too risky. The idea is that everything from building a rocket ship through to just creating a marketing plan for your next steps are possible solutions to your problem at this point. Now, the next stage of what we get to is the prototype stage. So this is where we now start to bundle our brainstormed ideas together. So perhaps building a rocket ship goes into maybe tomorrow's planning, and building a marketing campaign then sits along with a rebrand, where to get photos from, a strategic partnership with a branding expert or something like this. So we can start to bunch ideas as to how we're going to create solutions. And when we're prototyping, what we want to do is create essentially a minimum viable product or minimum viable answer as to the problem. But we're not necessarily just going to create one answer or one solution at this point. And what you want to do when you're prototyping is actually try and experience what your end user is going to experience. So, for example, and part of the IDEO, when IDEO was created, these guys, Tom and David Kelly, their original kind of job was to be a designer, like an actual physical designer, designing physical things. And what one of their first big projects was to create the design of a hospital layout. So a hospital layout is things like, and I don't think of this because I'm as far from a nurse as you could possibly get. But if they look at the nurse as their customer, what they're trying to have a look at now is, okay, so what is the things that we can prototype? So they would prototype what a room looks like for a nurse caring for a patient. And they're not necessarily going to go out and build a whole hospital because that would be ridiculous. But what you could do is you could sit there and you could map out with Post-it notes what that room's going to look like, down to how high is the bed? Can the patient be easily spoken to, and can they administer medication? Where is the emergency saving equipment, emergency medical equipment? Where is the non-emergency equipment? What are all of the different tiny little aspects that are part of that customer journey for that nurse? What do they look like? And you can create this in a way, as I said, with Post-it notes. I'm a massive fan of Post-it notes, unsurprisingly. Create the room. So write on the piece of paper, this is the bed, this is how high it is. And move a nurse, and a physical nurse, like maybe a little toy or something, around the room, trying to see how that's going to work. If you want to get crazy and you've got the, civil engineering skills, build it with Lego, build it with paddle pop sticks, build it with pipe cleaners. Whatever your product is or your solution is, try and start to experience it from your customer's perspective. So you're not continuing to assume what they want. We all assume what our customers want without necessarily asking them what it is they need us to solve. So we've now built our prototypes. I'm not sure how I'm going for time. I didn't actually look at that.
No, you're good. You got a few minutes.
Okay. So once we've built our prototypes, maybe we've got a few kind of ideas as to exactly what we're thinking could be the best solutions moving forward. Now we want to test. So when we test, what we want to do is make a decision based on our prototypes, based on the previous conversations with the empathy discussions that we've had earlier in the piece. And after we've kind of strategically brainstormed without boundaries, without hesitation, we're now testing one of our ideas. Now, a test isn't that you're going to pass, or it is, that you're going to pass or you're going to fail. It's either going to work or it's not. If it doesn't work, you go back to the beginning, figure out what went wrong, and go from there. Testing a product, testing a service doesn't necessarily mean this is your business over and it's finished and it's, you've done the wrong thing and you're never going to be able to recover. A test is a test. And within this testing phase, what you want to do is try and understand how this product, so create your minimum viable product, your minimum viable service, and then test that with your market group. Who are your clients? Get them to interact with it. If it's your new website, get them to launch it to a small group of people and say, hey, what do you think of this? Try and get people to understand it. If they say you need something, take that feedback on and utilize that to improve whatever your product is. And once you've been able to test that, then you can start to then create whatever your end product or your end solution or your end service is going to be. So if we kind of go back to the nurse, for example, if we have 2 prototypes, and one is a bed that, sits up here under my chin compared to a bed that sits at my hip height, obviously there's 2 different versions of a solution there. One is definitely a better viable product to test, because there's no point in having a bed up here because I'm not going to be able to do what I need to do. Similarly with a website, one might be a complete rebuild that's going to cost you $30,000, and you're a small business. You can't afford to spend $30,000. So come up with a better solution that's going to fit within your circumstances. So this is now where you start to bring in what your actual circumstances are, and then try and, use your prototypes to suit whatever your situation is at the time. So again, I'll just run through the process. So the empathy stage is actually talking to people that are using your services and actually talking to the people that you're trying to solve a problem for. For me, this was again, shouldn't it be groundbreaking, but was kind of groundbreaking when it came up, because I never had to interact. I interacted with customers, but I never had to interact with a point where I was creating solutions. I was in law, you've got a set of parameters that you need to meet to get an outcome for someone. And that's the box that we constantly operated in. But in 2 years, and someone comes back to me and says, hey, Rachel, I wanted to do this. And I had no idea that, they had a family, or they wanted to become an Australian citizen, or whatever this looked like. And that, decision or part of the puzzle that I helped them with 2 years ago means that they can't necessarily go on the rest of their journey. So had we got to know them at the beginning, the decisions that you make at the beginning are going to, really filter into the next part of the process and the experience for your customer. Then we define. So you've always got a starting point. You've always got what you think, but the define point is really ensuring that you flip that based on what your customer or your client says they need, not what you think they need. Then we ideate. So unfiltered brainstorming, nothing to do with what your budget is, what your circumstances are, any of these things. Get your play school on, start to get some colored pens, some butcher's paper, draw pictures, write crazy words, draw rocket ships, whatever works for you. Come up with ideas that might be able to work for you. Then when you prototype, start to group those ideas together. You will naturally try to come up with groups that are solutions or answers that are very similar, or that they can kind of be grouped into different ways. And then from that, you can start to prototype your solutions. And then when you get into your testing phase, this is when you can make a decision as to what you think the best way forward is for you at this point in your business, and test it, see what happens. And if it doesn't work, it doesn't work. You're not a failure. You tried. Pick up, try another way, and move on. Fail fast, fail quickly, and move on. So I don't want to finish on failing, but failing is not a bad thing. It means that you tried. So what I'm going to do, and I think that's about time, but what I'm going to do is I'll put together for everyone that wants it, a little package of materials that I found were outstanding for design thinking. Part of that is, so Stanford University in the States has a whole school dedicated to design thinking. So design thinking for business, for whatever, for life, for all of these things. So they have a really good kind of bootleg kit, they call it. So I'll send you guys that. And then a couple of just TED Talks that I think have been really helpful around the process. So I hope that was as exciting for you as it was for me. I flip and love design thinking, so it's super exciting to be talking to someone about it. So any questions, let me know. But if you want me to send you the package, just leave your email in the comments or send me a note and I'll flick you through the materials. Thanks.